A light breeze passed through the deserted park, lifting dry leaves into small whirlwinds under a gray and threatening sky. Can you guess where this story is going? Drop a comment with your city or country. Let's see how far this story reaches. Luca, a 3-year-old boy blind from birth, played quietly near his mother. The park, surrounded by dense forest, seemed like a safe place to spend the afternoon. But in an instant, everything changed. Luca's mother, Francesca, had become distracted while answering the phone, lowering her gaze for just a few seconds. When she looked up again, the child was no longer beside her. Her voice cracked in panic. "Luca? Where are you?" The little boy, curious about a distant sound, had wandered off among the trees, unaware of the danger. Alone and vulnerable, he began to feel the absence of his mother. His heart pounded as he started calling for her. "Mom! Help!" But in the thick of the trees, his voice got lost, overwhelmed by the sound of the leaves and wind. He had no idea where he was or which direction to take. Fear enveloped him, his outstretched hands searching for a point of reference, but all around him was emptiness. Just when it seemed Luca was completely abandoned, an unexpected presence appeared. A stray dog with rough fur and deep eyes emerged from behind a bush. It was thin, but in its movements, there was a determination that conveyed something unique. The dog watched the boy as if understanding his desperate situation. It barked once, a low, firm tone. Luca, hearing the sound, froze. There was something in that bark that didn't frighten him but reassured him, as if the mysterious animal were there to help. The dog slowly approached, brushing the boy's hand with its nose. Luca felt a strange sense of comfort. "Who are you?" Luca whispered. The unexpected meeting between the boy and the dog marked the beginning of something incredible. While Francesca continued searching desperately for her son, the stray dog seemed to have a plan. Luca's fate was now in its paws. Luca, still disoriented and scared, felt the warmth of the dog's breath near his hand. He couldn't see its appearance, but he sensed a reassuring and almost protective presence. The dog let out a soft whine, as if inviting him to follow. Somehow, the boy understood the message. "Do you want to help me?" Luca asked, his voice trembling. The dog barked again, this time with a decisive tone, and began walking slowly, stopping every few steps to make sure the boy was following. Luca clung to the trust the mysterious animal inspired in him and stretched out his hand, following the sound of its paws on the ground. Meanwhile, Francesca was wandering through the park, calling for her son. Her heart was a turmoil of fear and guilt. Every passing second seemed like an eternity. Several people in the park had joined her search, but no one had seen the boy. The dog suddenly stopped, its body stiffening. A sudden noise came from the underbrush, the crackling of broken branches. Luca, unaware of the danger, kept moving forward, but the dog positioned itself between him and the source of the sound, growling low. Suddenly, a large deer emerged from the dense trees. As frightened as they were, the animal stopped for a moment, then darted away, disappearing into the bushes. The dog, after ensuring the danger had passed, returned to Luca and licked his hand, as if to reassure him. "What was it?" Luca asked, sensing the dog had protected him. The dog simply nudged him gently with its nose, guiding him again toward a safe direction. One of the men helping with the search noticed small footprints in the wet ground. Francesca clung to that hope and started following the tracks. "Luca! Are you there?" she cried, her voice breaking. The dog, hearing the call, stopped and barked loudly, a sound that seemed to answer the boy's mother. "Mom!" Luca cried, recognizing her voice. But they were still not out of danger. Between the child and the mother was a small stream with unusually swift waters due to recent rains. Luca was too close to the edge and didn't realize it. The dog, sensing the danger, moved quickly. It positioned itself between Luca and the stream, barking furiously to attract the attention of the mother and rescuers. Francesca, guided by the sound, arrived just in time to see the dog gently push Luca back with its nose, moving him away from the slippery edge. She ran to her son, tears streaming down her face, and grabbed him, hugging him tightly, still trembling from the fear. "Thank God, Luca. You're safe." Then she turned toward the dog, which was watching the scene with an almost satisfied expression. Francesca knelt and reached out to him. "Thank you. I don't know who you are, but you saved my child." The dog looked at her, wagging its tail slightly but maintaining a distant air, almost as if it knew its mission was not yet over. Francesca, still kneeling beside Luca, kept looking at the dog in disbelief. There was something extraordinary about this stray. It didn't act like an ordinary animal but like a guardian sent specifically to protect her son. As she tried to reassure Luca, the dog perked up its ears, suddenly jumping to its feet. A rustling came from the underbrush ahead. Francesca stiffened, her protective instincts kicking in. "What is it?" she whispered, clutching the child. The dog positioned itself in front of them, its body as taut as a violin string. Then it barked loudly, the sound echoing through the trees. Francesca, scared but determined, picked up Luca and began following the dog, which seemed intent on taking them away from the danger. As they moved through the forest paths, Francesca began to hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They were not alone. She turned around but saw nothing through the thick trees. The dog, however, was growling softly, maintaining a defensive stance. "Let's get out of here quickly," she whispered, picking up the pace. Suddenly, a man emerged from the shadows. He was a hunter with a rifle slung over his shoulder. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked, his tone ambiguous. Francesca didn't respond immediately, too frightened. "Yes, we're just trying to get out of the park," she finally answered, her voice unsure. The hunter stared at her for a moment, then his eyes fell on the dog. "Is that your dog?" he asked, his tone too curious. Francesca hesitated. "No. But it saved my son." The hunter smiled faintly, but there was no kindness in his eyes. "Strange to find a dog like that around here. He could be useful." The dog, sensing something was wrong, quickly moved in front of Francesca and Luca, growling fiercely. The hunter took a step back, surprised by the animal's aggression. "I didn't mean any harm," he said, raising his hands. But Francesca didn't trust him. The dog continued to push them forward, guiding them toward the exit of the woods. Francesca felt increasingly safe following the animal, which seemed to have an unshakable determination. Luca, meanwhile, had calmed down in her arms. "Mom, he's an angel," the child whispered innocently. Luca's words echoed in Francesca's heart. How could an abandoned animal show so much courage and intelligence? A few minutes later, they reached a more open path where they finally spotted some lights in the distance. It was the park exit. Francesca turned toward the dog and knelt beside him. "I don't know who you are or where you come from, but we owe you everything. Thank you." The dog barked softly, wagging its tail gently. Just as Francesca thought their adventure was over, Luca knelt next to the dog, extending his small hands toward him. The dog approached, allowing Luca to stroke his muzzle. Luca laughed, a clear sound that brought a bit of light to that tense afternoon. "Can I keep him, Mom? He's my angel." Francesca hesitated for a moment, but deep inside, she already knew the answer. This dog was not simply a stray. He had become part of their family. After finally leaving the forest, Francesca, Luca, and the dog found themselves on the main road leading to the park's parking lot. The sunset light illuminated the path, bringing with it a sense of relief. But the calm didn't last long. The dog suddenly stopped, its ears perked. It began barking toward the opposite side of the road, its body stiff as a statue. Francesca, who had just let her guard down, felt a shiver run down her spine. "What's going on, friend?" she whispered, following the dog's gaze. From behind a bush, another figure appeared. It was the same hunter they had encountered earlier, but this time, his face showed a different expression. He had put down his rifle but was holding a small flashlight, aiming it directly at them. "Ma'am, I didn't mean to scare you earlier," he said in a calm voice, but one filled with tension. "That dog, does it belong to someone?" Francesca stood up, holding Luca's hand tightly. "I don't know. It saved my son." The hunter took a step forward, studying the dog. "This is no ordinary dog. I've never seen one like it around here. But it looks trained. It might have escaped from a special place or belonged to someone looking for it." Francesca's heart sank. What if the dog wasn't really a stray? Maybe he had a family or someone who was desperately searching for him. But before she could answer, the dog growled again, positioning itself between her and the man. The hunter stopped, raising his hands to calm the dog. All right. I don't mean any harm," he said with an uncertain smile. Francesca started to relax, but the hunter added something that sent a chill through her. "You know, a few months ago, a truck carrying animals was involved in an accident near this area. Some of those dogs escaped, and they say one of them was special, trained for rescue missions." Francesca's heart raced. Could it be true? Was this dog really a hero that had escaped from an accident? She looked at the animal, who now seemed calm but always vigilant, and began to wonder. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice trembling. The hunter shrugged. "I know because I work with a rescue team. I didn't want to scare you, but when I saw that dog, well, it seemed familiar." Francesca didn't know what to think. But Luca was determined. "He didn't escape, Mom. He's here for us. He's my angel." As they spoke, a car slowly approached down the road. The headlights illuminated the scene, and Francesca noticed there was a man inside who seemed to be looking for something. The dog turned toward the car, barking loudly. The car stopped beside them, and the window rolled down. "That's Max," the man exclaimed. Francesca looked at him in confusion. "Max? You know him?" "Yes. He's the dog I lost during that accident the hunter was talking about. He's a trained rescue dog, but we haven't found him since the accident." The dog slowly approached the car, looking at the man with attentive eyes. But instead of jumping in or immediately recognizing him, he returned to Luca's side, positioning himself next to him as if to protect the child. The man got out of the car and knelt before the dog, trying to get his attention. "Max, it's me. Come home." The dog looked at him but stayed by Luca's side. Francesca felt torn. If the dog truly belonged to that man, he had the right to take him back. But on the other hand, the bond that had formed with Luca was undeniable. "I don't know," Francesca said, looking at the dog. "He saved my son. Maybe he's here for a reason." The parking lot, now bathed in the evening twilight, had become the scene of an emotional confrontation. Francesca, the man who claimed to be the dog's owner, and the hunter were all standing still while the dog remained by Luca's side, almost as if to show where his place was. Luca, with his innocence, reached out a hand toward the dog and said, "You'll stay with me, right? Don't go away." Francesca watched the scene with a heavy heart. She couldn't ignore the deep bond the dog had developed with her son, but at the same time, the man in front of her seemed genuinely attached to the animal. "I don't want to cause any problems," the man said in a softer tone. "Max is a trained dog, and he's always been special. If he's chosen to stay with your son, there's a reason. But I just want to make sure you know he's not a stray. He's been with me for years, and I've been desperately searching for him since he disappeared." Francesca felt torn. The dog, who kept watching the man attentively, seemed conflicted too. For a moment, he approached the man, sniffed him, and barked softly, as if to recognize him. But immediately after, he returned to Luca's side, sitting next to the child as if to say, "Now, my mission is here. The hunter, who had been silent up until then, intervened with a reflection. You know, animals have a special instinct. Max has chosen to stay with this boy, maybe because he knows he's needed here. But it's also true that if he's really a trained dog, he could help many other people. These words struck Francesca deeply. She knelt beside the dog and stroked his head. You're really a hero, you know that. But I don't know what the right thing to do is for you. Luca interrupted the moment, hugging the dog. Mom, he doesn't want to leave. He saved me. He's my friend. The man, seeing Luca's emotion and the evident bond between the child and the dog, stepped back. Maybe we can find a solution, he said, looking at Francesca. I could leave him with you for a while and come back to visit him. It's clear that right now, he feels his place is here. Francesca was surprised by those words. She hadn't expected the man to be willing to part with the dog, even temporarily. That would be wonderful, she said, feeling a wave of relief. I don't want to take something precious from you, but this dog has done so much for us today. We can't just let him go. The man nodded slowly. Max has always been an extraordinary animal. If he's chosen you, there's a reason. But I'd just like to be able to see him again. In the following minutes, while the hunter stepped away to leave them to discuss, Luca and the dog continued to play together in the parking lot. The child laughed, stroking the animal's fur, and seemed to have forgotten all the fear he had just felt. Francesca watched the scene with a mix of joy and relief. The dog wasn't just a savior for Luca, he seemed to have brought a sense of hope and protection into their lives. Maybe he's truly a gift, she thought to herself. The man who claimed to be the dog's owner approached once more, this time with a more serene smile. I'll leave you my number. If you need help with him, call me. But promise me you'll take care of him like he deserves. Francesca nodded. You can count on it. We'll do everything we can for him. In the days following the incredible meeting, Francesca and Luca brought the dog, who they now officially called Max, into their daily life. Max quickly adapted, showing not only affection but also extraordinary intelligence. However, not everything went smoothly. One evening, while Francesca was putting Luca to bed, the dog started acting strangely. He was pacing back and forth in front of the living room window, barking outside. Francesca pulled back the curtains to see what was troubling him but saw nothing. What's wrong, Max? She asked, stroking him to calm him down. Max stopped barking but remained still, staring at a spot in the darkness. It was as if he sensed something that Francesca couldn't perceive. Despite her unease, she decided to ignore the dog's behavior, thinking it was just nervousness. But the next morning, as she walked Luca to daycare, Francesca noticed a suspicious man who seemed to be following them. He had a furtive air and was trying not to draw attention, but Max noticed him immediately. The dog positioned himself between the man and Francesca, growling with a ferocity he had never shown before. Is everything okay? Francesca asked the man, trying to remain calm. The man raised his hands, pretending innocence. Oh, excuse me. I just noticed that dog. He looks like one I was looking for. Francesca eyed him suspiciously, holding Luca's hand tightly. I don't know what you're talking about, but this dog is with us now. The man nodded with an enigmatic smile and slowly walked away. Max continued to stare at him until he was completely out of sight. Francesca couldn't ignore the unease that had crept into her heart. That evening, she decided to call the man who had claimed to be Max's owner. She told him about the encounter with the suspicious man and the dog's unusual behavior. Do you think someone's trying to take him back? She asked, worried. I'm not sure, the man replied, his voice tense. But it's possible. Max isn't an ordinary dog, and if someone knows how special he is, they might want him for not so noble purposes. Francesca shuddered. She didn't want to imagine that someone could have ill intentions toward Max, especially now that he had become part of their family. I'll keep an eye out, she said finally. But I won't let anyone take him away. Meanwhile, the hunter they had met in the park reached out again upon hearing about the situation. He offered his help. I know how to track suspicious people, he said seriously. If that man is trying to steal the dog, we can find out. Francesca hesitated, unsure if she should fully trust him. But Max seemed to appreciate the hunter's presence, which was unusual for the dog. She decided to accept the help, hoping it would be useful. That same night, Francesca heard a noise outside the door. Her heart skipped a beat as she approached to check. Max was already there, standing in front of the door, growling softly. Francesca peered through the peephole and saw a shadowy figure trying to force the lock. "Who's there?" she shouted, trying to stay calm. The figure stopped for a moment, then disappeared into the darkness. Max barked furiously, scratching the door as if chasing the intruder. Francesca immediately called the hunter and told him what had happened. "This is serious," the man said. "You need to file a report and set up security cameras. It'll help you protect Max." Francesca nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. She wouldn't let anyone endanger her family or the dog that had saved her son. Despite the tension, Max seemed more protective than ever. He stayed close to Luca, monitoring every movement around them. Luca, for his part, seemed to find in the dog an endless source of comfort. "Max is my hero," he often said, gently petting him. Francesca knew that the bond between the dog and the child was special. But now, it was clear that Max would give his life to protect them. The next morning, Francesca woke with a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. The events of the previous night continued to haunt her. Looking out the window, she saw Max sitting on the lawn, his gaze fixed on the edge of their garden. He was vigilant, as if waiting for something, or someone. As she prepared breakfast for Luca, a familiar car pulled up in front of the house. It was the hunter. He got out of the vehicle with a serious expression, carrying some documents and an electronic device. "I've done some research," he said, entering with purposeful steps. "And I think there are more people involved in this matter." Francesca looked at him with concern. "What do you mean?" The hunter explained that he had traced some suspicious activities in the area. The man they had seen in the park was part of an organization looking to recover trained animals to sell them illegally. Max, with his extraordinary abilities, was likely one of the main targets, he continued. They must have heard about the truck accident, and now they're desperately searching for him. Francesca felt frozen. "What can we do to protect him?" "First of all, I've installed security cameras around the house," the hunter said, showing the device he had brought with him. "And we need to keep a close watch on Max. Never leave him alone." That evening, after putting Luca to bed, Francesca sat with Max beside her. She stroked the dog slowly, lost in her thoughts. She had developed such a strong bond with him, and seeing him so protective of Luca gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. But now, with this new threat emerging, she wondered if she was doing the right thing. Max deserved a peaceful life, free from danger, and maybe staying with them wasn't the best solution for him. "What should I do, Max?" she murmured, looking into his eyes. The dog responded by laying his head on her lap, almost as if to reassure her that his place was here, with them. The following day, the man who had claimed to be Max's owner came to visit again. He brought some documents that proved Max had been originally trained as a rescue dog for an international rescue team. "These dogs are extraordinary," he explained. "They are trained to help in emergency situations, and Max is one of the best we've ever had. But if you want to keep him, I won't stop you. It seems he's found a new mission with you." Francesca was silent for a moment, her heart torn. On one hand, she knew Max had a special gift, and he could save more lives. On the other hand, the bond with Luca was now inseparable. "I need to think about it," she finally said. That night, another shadow moved around the house. The cameras installed by the hunter picked up movement, and a discreet alarm alerted Francesca. She jumped up and saw Max already in position in front of the door. When Francesca looked at the footage, she saw two men with flashlights trying to approach the house. One of them seemed to be the same man they had met in the park. She immediately called the hunter and the man who had claimed to be Max's owner. They both arrived quickly, and the two suspicious men fled before they could be confronted. The next morning, Francesca decided it was time to act. She spoke to Luca, explaining that Max was special and that some bad people wanted to take him away. But they can't. Luca protested, tears in his eyes. Max is my friend. Francesca hugged him tightly. I know, sweetheart. We'll do everything we can to protect him. But it might be necessary to find a way to keep him safe, even if that means letting him go for a while. Max watched the scene as if he understood every word. He approached Luca, licking his hand, and the boy hugged him even tighter. The next night was different. Max seemed more vigilant than usual, his eyes constantly fixed on the windows. Francesca, sitting next to him, felt that something was about to happen. There was an unnatural silence in the air, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves moved by the wind. Around midnight, a distinct sound made Francesca jump, a broken branch near the side of the house. Max jumped to his feet, barking with a ferocity Francesca had never seen before. Looking through the security cameras, Francesca saw three figures moving stealthily toward the back of the house. One of them was carrying a tool that seemed to be a crowbar. Francesca's heart was pounding. She grabbed the phone and called the hunter, who had insisted she alert him in case of emergency. They're trying to break in, she whispered, her voice trembling. Keep the door closed and stay calm. I'm on my way, the hunter replied, his tone decisive. Max was already positioned in front of the back door, his fur standing on end and his teeth exposed. Francesca picked up Luca and took him to an inner room, locking the door. Don't be afraid, sweetheart. Max will protect us, she whispered, trying to stay calm for the child's sake. One of the men began forcing the back door open. Francesca heard the metallic sound of the crowbar against the lock. Max was ready. With a powerful leap, he launched himself at the door, barking furiously. The sound startled the intruders, but they didn't stop. When they finally managed to force the door open, Max pounced on the first man, knocking him to the ground with a deep growl. The other two backed off, surprised by the dog's reaction. Just then, sirens could be heard in the distance. The hunter arrived moments later, accompanied by local police who had been alerted during the drive. The men tried to flee but were quickly blocked. Francesca watched everything from the window, Luca tightly held in her arms. Max, still positioned in front of the door, seemed ready to defend the family at any cost. It's incredible, one of the officers said to the hunter. This dog practically stopped the attack on his own. After the arrest of the intruders, the police found compromising documents in their backpacks. They contained detailed information about Max and his training. One of the men confessed they had been trying to recover him to sell him to an organization that used trained animals for unethical purposes. The hunter, along with Max's supposed owner, examined the documents. These men were part of an international animal trafficking organization, the hunter explained. Max wasn't just a rescue dog, he was one of the most valuable ones they had ever trained. Francesca felt sick at the thought that Max was considered just a valuable object by these people. She looked at the dog, who was now back beside Luca, licking his face to calm him down. It doesn't matter what those documents say, Francesca said determinedly. Max is part of our family now. While the situation seemed resolved, the hunter warned Francesca that the threat wasn't completely eliminated. If this is an international organization, they might try to come back. We need to be ready. Francesca nodded, but the thought frightened her. She couldn't imagine losing Max, especially after everything they had been through together. The house felt different with Max inside. As Francesca tucked Luca into bed that first night, the German shepherd settled himself across the doorway, his ears twitching at every unfamiliar creak of the old house. "He's standing guard," Luca whispered, his small fingers clutching the blanket. Francesca smiled, watching how Max's amber eyes reflected the nightlight. "Like your own personal night." She knelt beside the dog, running a hand over his scarred flank. "You know you're safe here too, right?" Max responded by licking her wrist once before resuming his watch. At 2:17 a.m., Francesca awoke to frantic scratching at the back door. She found Max pawing at the wood, his hackles raised. Through the window, she spotted raccoons raiding their trash cans, a weekly nuisance she'd long ignored. But Max took his new duties seriously. With one thunderous bark from the doorway, he sent the masked bandits scurrying into the woods. When Francesca turned on the porch light, she found Max sitting proudly amidst the scattered garbage, his tail sweeping the deck. "Good boy," she laughed, scratching behind his ears. The words felt foreign yet right. As she cleaned up, Max stayed glued to her side, his warm shoulder brushing her leg. Back in bed, Francesca realized this was the first time since her divorce she hadn't double-checked the locks. Dark clouds rolled in the following Thursday, bringing with them a summer storm that rattled the windows. Luca clutched Max's fur as thunder shook the house, the dog's steady breathing anchoring them both. When a particularly close lightning strike made the power flicker, Max suddenly bolted upstairs. Francesca found him in her bedroom, nudging a framed photo of Luca's father off the nightstand with his nose. "No, Max." She grabbed the frame, but the dog whined insistently, pawing at her closet door. That's when she smelled it, the acrid tang of burning wires. Max's frantic barking led her to the smoke curling from the outlet behind her shoe rack. The fire department confirmed what Max already knew, faulty wiring in that one outlet could have sparked a disaster. "You're full of surprises," the firefighter said, scratching Max's chin as the dog sat regally beside his new family. Luca beamed, declaring Max could predict the future. That night, Francesca ordered Max an official service dog vest online. Not because they needed the designation, but because the world should recognize what they already knew, this was no ordinary dog. The doorbell rang on a rainy Tuesday morning. A woman in a crisp navy suit stood on their porch, a badge clipped to her belt. "Department of Animal Services. We've had reports about an unlicensed German shepherd." Francesca's stomach dropped as Max positioned himself between the officer and Luca. "He's a rescue," Francesca explained, hands trembling as she produced the vet records. "We're still getting his paperwork sorted." The officer's eyes narrowed at Max's scars. "These look like training marks. You're aware it's illegal to keep a working military dog?" A whimper escaped Luca's lips as he buried his face in Max's neck. The dog didn't growl, but the way his muscles coiled spoke volumes. Then something remarkable happened. Max walked to the coffee table and nudged Luca's school folder toward the officer with his nose. When the woman opened it, she found last week's assignment titled, "My Hero," a crayon drawing of Max saving Luca in the woods. The officer's stern expression softened. She knelt to examine Max's microchip. "Well now," she murmured, reading the scanner. "This says his name is actually Sergeant Maximus. Retired K9, honorably discharged after." She trailed off, eyes flicking to Luca. After a long pause, she handed Francesca a form. "Get him registered by Friday." "And ma'am?" "That dog didn't just retire, he was medically discharged for saving his handler's life." As the taillights disappeared down the street, Francesca hugged Max tightly, wondering what other secrets lay beneath his scars. David arrived on Saturday with a duffel bag of training gear. "If Max is staying, he needs to react to threats appropriately," he explained, unpacking bite sleeves and a dummy gun. Luca giggled as Max gently took treats from his fingers during obedience drills. But when David pretended to grab Francesca roughly, the dog's transformation was terrifying. Max moved like liquid shadow, 85 pounds of coiled muscle pinning David to the grass before the man could blink, his snarl vibrating against the protective sleeve. A single snap of Francesca's fingers released the hold instantly. Remarkable control, David gasped, rubbing his arm. This isn't just training. He's assessing real threats. Their lesson took a chilling turn when David produced a recording of gunshots. Max didn't cower, he herded Luca into the bathroom, his body becoming a living barricade against the door. That night, Francesca found Max systematically checking every window and closet before settling at Luca's bedside. She finally understood, to Max, this wasn't a new home. It was his last mission. As she kissed Luca goodnight, her son whispered something that made her eyes burn, "Mommy? I think God sent Max because Daddy couldn't stay." Outside, summer lightning flashed in the distance. But for the first time in years, Francesca wasn't afraid of the storm. Luca's scream tore through the house at 3:42 a.m. Francesca reached his room to find Max already on the bed, his massive body curled around the sobbing child. Not restraining, containing. "Bad men were taking you away," Luca hiccuped into Max's fur. The dog's tongue swiped methodically across the boy's tear-streaked cheeks as his tail thumped a steady rhythm against the mattress. Francesca knelt beside them, her hand automatically finding the scar along Max's ribs. The raised tissue felt like braille under her fingertips, telling stories of battles she'd never know. When Luca finally stilled, Max lifted his head and locked eyes with Francesca. In that moment, she saw it, the same haunted look she saw in the mirror after her divorce. The dog knew nightmares weren't just for children. She woke at dawn to find Max's weight against her bedroom door and Luca curled against his side, both breathing in synchronized rhythm. The message was clear, no monsters would get past this guardian. The county fair should have been safe. Crowds laughed under twinkling lights as Luca dragged Max toward the petting zoo, the dog's service vest drawing admiring glances. Then the fireworks started. Max's entire body stiffened as the first explosion lit the sky. Francesca saw the war flash in his eyes, ears flattening, muscles coiling for combat. But before she could react, Luca's small hands framed the dog's face. "Look at me," the boy commanded, his voice trembling but clear. "We're safe, Max, breathe with me." Francesca watched in awe as her blind son guided the traumatized K9 through the barrage of noise, their foreheads pressed together. When the grand finale boomed overhead, Max's tail gave a single wag, not happy, but present. Later, as they ate melting ice cream, a veteran in a faded army cap approached. He took one look at Max's scars and nodded. "Afghanistan?" Francesca shook her head. "We don't actually know his airstrikes," the man interrupted, pointing to the faint burn marks along Max's back. "This boy's been through hellfire." He knelt with a groan, letting Max sniff his hands. "Still on duty, huh, Sergeant?" The way Max gently rested his head on the man's shoulder told Francesca more than any service record ever could. The shoebox under Francesca's bed wasn't hidden so much as forgotten. But when Max dragged it out one rainy afternoon, the past came rushing back. Luca's fingers traced the wedding photo. "Daddy had a dog too?" Francesca's breath caught. The Malinois in the picture wasn't just any dog, it was Jaeger, her ex-husband's military K9. Lost in the same IED blast that ended his career, and their marriage. Max sniffed the photo intently, then let out a sound Francesca had never heard, a keening whine that raised the hairs on her arms. He pawed at the box until Luca uncovered Jaeger's old collar. The moment the worn leather touched Max's nose, the dog froze. His entire body trembled as he carefully gathered the collar in his mouth and carried it to Luca's lap. Francesca's hands shook as she pieced together timelines. Same deployment. Same unit. The way Max reacted to Luca's father's voice on old videos. "Oh God," she whispered. Max wasn't just any retired K9. He was the sole survivor of Jaeger's unit. The dog who dragged 2 wounded soldiers to safety before disappearing into the desert night. And somehow, against all odds, he'd found his way home. The official letter arrived on heavy government stationery. Francesca read the words, Canine Reintegration Program 3 times before they made sense. They want him back, she told David, the paper crumpling in her fist. Some black ops contractor filed a claim. David's face darkened. They can't just. They can. His chip still lists him as government property. She watched Max nudge Luca's braille book closer to the boy's searching hands. They say he's worth $250,000 in training. That night, Francesca made calls. The hunter knew a journalist. David had a lawyer friend. The veteran from the fair had contacts at Veterans Affairs. But it was Luca who devised their real plan. As dawn painted the kitchen in pale gold, Francesca filmed her son's small hands signing adoption papers Max held in his teeth. The video went viral by noon, #LetMaxStay trending in 3 states. When the government agents came, they found the entire neighborhood lining the street. Veterans stood shoulder to shoulder with preschoolers, all wearing handmade Max's Family t-shirts. The lead agent took one look at Max's unbreakable stance guarding Luca and sighed. "Ma'am, you need to understand." "No," Francesca interrupted, her voice steady for the first time in years. "You need to understand. This isn't a dog. This is family." Behind her, Max's tail thumped once. A soldier's approval. In the following days, Francesca's house was put under protection, with additional cameras installed and an advanced alarm system. Max continued to watch over them, but he also showed a sweet and affectionate side toward Luca, who seemed to trust him completely. One evening, while Luca was petting Max before going to sleep, he said, "Mom, Max isn't just a dog. He's our angel." Francesca smiled, wiping away a tear. "Yes, sweetheart. That's exactly what he is." In the days following the attack, Max's story spread throughout the community. Neighbors gathered to celebrate the dog's bravery, organizing a small ceremony in his honor. Luca, beaming with happiness, prepared a drawing for Max, depicting him as a true hero. "He's our protector," the child proudly said. Francesca felt a wave of gratitude for this extraordinary dog who had entered their lives so unexpectedly but had brought with him strength, courage, and unconditional love. With the threat finally eliminated, Francesca and Luca were able to start rebuilding a normal life. Max, while still maintaining his vigilant nature, seemed more relaxed, as if he knew the danger had passed. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the garden, Francesca stroked Max and said, "You're more than a dog to us. You're family." Luca joined her, hugging Max, "And you'll always be my best friend," he added, smiling. With the criminal network dismantled and the intruders arrested, Francesca's house returned to being a place of peace. Max, their tireless protector, resumed living with them, but something had changed in him. His behavior was calmer, almost as if he had finally understood he was safe and truly belonged to that family. Luca, who had lived moments of fear and courage alongside his 4-legged friend, never left Max's side. They were inseparable, and every day, the bond between them grew deeper. One morning, while they were playing together in the garden, Francesca watched the scene with a smile. The sun filtered through the trees, and the sound of Luca's laughter mixed with Max's happy barks. It was a scene she could never have imagined just a few months earlier, when their life had been so different. A few weeks later, Francesca received an unexpected call. It was the hunter, who told her, "Francesca, they want to recognize Max's bravery. There's a ceremony organized by the local association to celebrate animals that have performed heroic acts. Max will be the guest of honor." Francesca accepted with pride, knowing how well-deserved that recognition was. During the ceremony, Max received a special medal and a certificate for his bravery. The crowd applauded, and Luca, beaming with pride, held up Max's award to show everyone. "Max is the best dog in the world," he declared enthusiastically, earning a warm round of applause. Over time, Francesca was able to regain control of her life. The emotional scars left by the past events began to heal, thanks to the love and support of Luca and Max. "I don't know how I would have managed without you," she said one evening to Max, stroking him as he rested beside her on the sofa. "You've been our hero. But more than anything, you're part of our family." Max lifted his gaze, wagging his tail gently, as if to say that he would always watch over them. Max's story became an inspiration for many in the community. The courage and loyalty of a stray dog who had become the protector of a family demonstrated how love and determination could overcome any adversity. Francesca decided to share their experience with others, telling the story of Max at an event dedicated to raising awareness about animal welfare and adoption. "Every animal has priceless value," she said to the audience. "Max didn't just save our lives, he taught us what it truly means to love unconditionally." As the seasons passed, Francesca, Luca, and Max continued living their lives together, building happy memories and looking toward the future with hope. Max remained Luca's faithful companion, protecting him and playing with him every day. One evening, as the sun set, Luca hugged Max and said, "Thank you for being my best friend." "I love you, Max." Francesca, watching that scene, felt her heart fill with gratitude. They had gone through difficult times, but together, they had found the strength to overcome them. Max wasn't just a dog. He was the symbol of their resilience, and their love as a family. The end.